thank you so much to everyone for either attending or listening, because we are recording this session. So, you know, by all means, please do download it, you know, once it's available. But just to let you know, this is our second Leaders Advisory webinar of the year, and it's all around kind of reshaping business strategy to leverage data as an asset. So I think it's a hugely important topic. But we've just given you a bit of a background. So we've also got our new Leaders Advisory group on LinkedIn. So do feel free to join that group. And what I do is I'll put a link into the group after this session. But we've set it up really to, you know, I think invite all the C-suite level into the group. So where we can just really, I think, thrash out different ideas. And we're a niche kind of specialist business in data and AI, and we work across consulting and staffing and executive search. We also offer our award-winning Nurture program. So this is an internship for master students in AI, data science, AI, IoT. And really what it does is it offers kind of students the opportunity of working with different businesses across different industries. So feel free to have a look at our website if you want some more info.
The trend we're seeing now in this digital era, particularly after COVID and with the advent of AI, is that, you know, in that triangle of people, process, and technology, that's what we're seeing with our customers anyway, which is massive amounts of data. As one of my friends, one of my partners, said that most companies have around 500 applications in their enterprise, and you can imagine the amount of data that's requiring and creating, and it needs to be managed, integrated, and monetized wherever possible. And what we're seeing from many different companies is the creation of marketplaces to sell your data as a company to third parties. And so with those marketplaces being created, data is being traded and value is being created for that data. And so we're getting a much more objective view of value for data. And so it's now being looked at by the accounting bodies more around how can we value data purposely for stakeholders and investors to put on the balance sheet. One of the things, you know, regardless of whether it's in the balance sheet or not, one of the things that is, you know, really important is that data underpins every strategic, tactical, and operational decision, which, if you look at your own company, you know, you have to question, am I managing data in the right way? You know, I wouldn't be in a job if everyone was managing data in the right way. But, you know, you have to look at sort of, am I using it as an asset? Am I driving the best value out of it? And, you know, just put it with a simple analogy, if you're in a production-based business, and you've purchased a machine, and that machine costs millions to buy, millions to install, millions to maintain every year, you know, and that machine is critical to your operations, critical to meeting customer needs, solving customer problems, you know, would you let anybody use it? That's the thing that I always think about when we look at data, because, you know, we invite many different people to use data in different ways, and basically that causes a lot of confusion and understanding. And so I ask myself when I go into companies, and why is data any different to any other operation or any other asset? But one of the questions I always get asked when I go into customers is, you know, where do you start with data? With all this massive data, where do you start? And I always say that data is not created equal. You have to ask yourself the question as leaders, you know, what data is needed. If data at an enterprise level is governed, organized, and improved, it can give countless benefit to multiple departments. You know, examples of this is customer behavioral data, supply chain operational data, people data, financial data. All, if used correctly across the enterprise, can drive multiple benefits across your organization. A simple example, again, very practical example, is when I was a CDO, when I started within one of the businesses within BP, we looked at fixing customer addresses. Very simple piece of data. We had thousands of customers with many different address locations, and we just went in and fixed those locations. And what it did was reduce wrong invoices to those customers, wrong deliveries were stopped, so fuel savings, logistical savings. It improved customer loyalty because we were delivering the right product at the right time. It improved our cash flow, and it also helped us understand our customer behaviors better from a geospatial view. And just doing that one field or several fields of customer location drove massive amounts of benefits across the business. To give you one financial example, the wrong invoices that were seen were actually costing us 1.2 million a year. And so we saved that money immediately, and all it took was re-education and reworking with the people that were delivering the customer addresses and inputting them. So there's practical ways to drive value from the asset. And what we see, and what I see, is that many customers that we go into have people, as I said, working with data across the business in different silos, managing it separately, manipulating it separately, all the different departments holding their own sets of data at tactical or operational level, with varying degrees of accuracy and completeness. And what that does, it just causes confusion across the organization and drives inefficiencies. So, I ask myself, how do we leverage data effectively? And data itself, its value, and I've seen this countless times, can be multiplied when it's connected, organized, and managed. Just like any other asset, its role, as I always say, is to be available to the right person, process, or technology, the 3-point tier, at the right time and be converted at the right level of data or information. So that's its purpose. And what I ask of you is, if you have a data department or chief data officer, you have to ask yourself, are they focused on that business value and looking at the strategic business outcomes, or do they spend time talking about technical operations? A CDO or any data lead, including the ones that work for me, I saw them as a strategic leader first, and then a data or technical person second. And that's the way you should be looking at your department. Is you will not see a marketing, HR, finance executive ever talking about the technical aspects of their role to yourself unless it's part of a business conversation. And you don't need to know those technical aspects as an executive. So yes, they will have objectives and KPIs, but if they're not set to focus on the business aspects and the business outcomes, then you're essentially investing money in the wrong areas for data. That's what I wanted to give. So lastly, I want to say, why reshape the business strategy to focus on data as an asset? Well, as I said to you, it can be often hugely expensive for a business if they're focused on the wrong areas of data. It costs a lot of money to run data, and having an enterprise data strategy in place to enable the business strategy will mean that, as I mentioned earlier, that they'll focus on driving business outcomes and driving business value, and creating a customer-focused, data-enabled business will unlock huge value for the company. That's it, Jane. Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's really useful, Matthew. It's given us lots of food for thought, and I think it's quite obvious that I think data plays a kind of a huge fundamental role in driving business strategy. I think it's clear. I think it's clear that strong data strategy really needs to be aligned with the overall business goals, I suppose. So it's all about, and this is something we've talked about internally as well. I think it's all about kind of building a culture that really, I suppose, truly values data as an asset, which is going to be key. So, I mean, Matt, I'm assuming this is key for business leaders to, I suppose, absolutely consider when staying ahead of their competitors.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things you have to think about is you're asking questions now, particularly with AI, of your data. And if you're not managing that data as an asset, are you getting the right answers from that data? So, I had an example I was going to share, but it essentially, business leaders are making decisions on data, and they're now using AI to drive their own questions out of data. And if they're getting the wrong answers back, they can make strategic decisions that cost millions We had one when I was CDO. We took over the supply chain metrics and started looking at those and found that they were actually being calculated wrongly. The metrics were being calculated wrongly by the different countries, over 80 countries. And one of those countries was Italy, and they had 2 plants originally in Italy, and they decided to get rid of one based on the metrics. And we found the one they got rid of was actually had the right metrics, and the other one was using their own metrics. And when we calculated them to the standard metrics that they should have done, they actually got rid of the wrong plant, which was a multi-million-pound decision. Obviously, many people released. So I think the big thing about data is trust. Can you trust the data that's being put forward to you as an executive? Can you trust the information with everyone having access to that data and everyone being able to send data or create a PowerPoint? Can you trust the data that's being put in front of you to make a business decision?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Elaine, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, hi, sorry. Hi, Matthew, I'm
Hi,
again. I'm just nodding my head vigorously and absolutely 100% on the trust. But I think, and your case study was just, oh my goodness, that's gobsmacking. But it's that understanding the data, that data literacy component as well. So people don't assume that they know what they're looking at because it's called the same thing, but they actually unpack that and really get under the covers of it. And that's where I think, if I think of a particular example like retention, people think, oh, retention, this is what it is in my world, therefore it's the same thing. But it could be a customer retention, a dollar retention, a product retention,
Absolutely.
all kinds of different things. So that discovery, understanding, leading to the trust, I think is absolutely critical as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
No,
absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I've really thought about is not just trust, but time. I'm sure I said this when we met that time, but we were having a few drinks out when they are was time to value. That's the key thing for business in this competitive digital world, is that a lot of competitors can pivot, especially if they have their organized data. They can move quickly to release new products, new ways of working, and answer customer needs or customer problems very quickly. And you really have to think about the time it takes you from idea inception to actually delivering that idea to value. For us, it was, when I was a CDO in a company, it was months and months. It took us 6 months to get the data and prep it. By the time I finished as CDO after 5 years, it was taking a day. So that time to value is crucial to think about for data as well. That's something it really enables.
A big difference, massive difference there. It really is. Eric, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, Matthew, the notion of treating data as an asset, I think has been around for a while, but we're really looking hard at that at the moment. And one of the ERD diagrams we're pushing around now is, we've got 16 entities at the top level of our firm, and asset is one of them. And an example I'm using is we've got computer assets, but we also have building assets.
Yeah.
And one of the slippery things is we've also got data sets as assets. And where does it really fit? And, it's an interesting modeling concept, but operational governance is one that gets talked about all the time. And Gartner's going to send the pack into your firm once a year saying you need data stewards and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
But it's a couple of decades old story trying to get operational governance sorted out and change behaviors of people doing stuff. But it's that senior stakeholder thing I'm really interested in your feedback on, because getting it on the balance sheet is a really interesting concept, and there's multiple ways in which you can measure cost and value of these data sets. And to do that properly is quite a journey. But what sort of language are you using with stakeholders to get them interested? Because at the moment, whenever you have a discussion, the mega, my eyes glaze over occurs, because there's got to be a technical element to this. But if you go into any domain in the business, whether it be people or asset management or ESG that's coming up, there's a lot of lingo going around about each domain, and they're quite happy to talk about that. But whenever you talk to anyone about data, they go, oh, So I know there's a lot of language shift to go on, but what sort of things are you seeing your customers do to engage those very senior stakeholders to actually focus on this asset, which I'm here, I believe, is driving everything, but they think they can use their gut intuition or whatever to keep the business going without really focusing on what we're trying to show them. And it's, how do you flip that?
It's, for me, we just sat down and presented for a grueling 8 hours to various different executives for a big charity in the US. And 2 of those hours were just with the CEO alone. And you have to turn it into what is important to them. What is important to the executive. They don't want to know about your technical problems or data issues or governance, or, like you said, they really don't want to hear about it. It's just like you wouldn't want to hear about if I started talking to you about the tax issues of the company. You'd be going, oh my God, or treasury issues. If I was a finance person, you have to talk about the value to that person, to that executive. They have their own objectives. They have their in-year objectives. They have their strategic objectives. Finding out what those are and how you can help them speed up those deliveries is vital. We, as a CDO, before I did consulting, we worked in harmony with marketing. They were really our true partners. And in the end, we were planning together every year. So they took on sort of 10 people in their department from my team, integrated them into their team, and we were planning what they wanted to do on customer deliverables, customer loyalty. We had a marketing portal that we managed the data and the throughput through. It's really about being a partner to your executives of how do you help them achieve their objectives, because frankly, they will fund your data governance. They will fund your objectives. So when I started, I was basically doing projects with them and funding what they needed to deliver. By the end of it, and this is what I learned, was that I was delivering my entire team's budget based off of work with the other executives. So I funded data governance, I funded business glossary. You can't talk to an executive about business glossary, but it was all this is what it's going to take to keep your business and your portal sustainable. You
got the function embedded in each business domain.
Yeah.
And again, it's just showing that value across, I think, all the different business units as well. And for, I suppose, the heads of the different business units to really understand how this is going to help, their teams on a day-to-day basis. I think that's
they talk the business language first,
yeah,
and technical language second. I had people that could convert from business language to technical language as well.
Yeah.
So there were conversion specialists that would convert it, because I never let the two together, because they'd always be like, what the hell are you talking about, both sides. I did it once with a data scientist, put them straight in, and it was a disaster, absolute disaster. I had to sort of be the negotiation, both sit on a sofa and tell me about your problems thing. And they both wanted to improve the business, but one wanted to improve it technically and one wanted to improve it from their business. So,
and that's what businesses are crying out for now. I think is when we talk about these unicorns, it's very much finding someone who has enough commercial acumen to be able to talk data to the rest of the business and to stakeholders and to the C-suite, which I think is hugely important. So,
absolutely.
Yeah, really good skills. Oh, thanks, Matthew. That was brilliant. So
really good questions. Thank you.
Yeah, and Devendra, should we move over to you?
Yeah, sure. Nice to meet you all. I am Devendra, or Dev Sharma, if it's easy for you to call me. I have got around 15 to 20 years of experience in data, and the last 10 years has been leadership. My last 2 roles has been with HSBC and BCG, and recently joined Korea as a CDO. I was at HSBC for 5 years, leading the data analytics and AI transformation across the enterprise and delivering that strategy across all the markets. More than BCG, delivering the data and AI capabilities, and essentially helping the business to transform the AI specifically in the last year and a half or so. So yeah, my pitch would be, or the data as an asset will not be too much dissimilar to what Matt has already said. So, but I've got few slides, which I will just take you through. So what is the importance of the data in the business? Based on my experience and based on what I've observed with different clients and essentially at HSBC as well, I've realized that the moment you start treating data as an asset, essentially start building lots of efficiencies, and it also helps you in terms of transformation as well. You must have heard of all these things already, that data is the new oil and it's the fuel for the strategy. But the great thing about data is it never runs out. It always becomes more and more valuable the more you use it. If you utilize it effectively, as Matt basically use it as a marketplace. You can sell your data, you can monetize your data, and essentially increase the profitability of the business at least by 60%. All these numbers you are seeing here are not made by me. It's just basically I've collected this information from various places. I had some of the information in the past, so I basically brought that information. Some of them is from Gartner, some of them is from McKinsey, things like that. So please don't assume that I've just put in some random numbers. But they may not be 100% accurate, but they are close. I've also observed, specifically with my role at BCG, when I was helping the clients, the moment that you start driving your initiatives through data, it enhances your operational efficiency and also increases the competitive advantage. You have seen recently, most of the organizations really struggle to essentially get out of their legacy infrastructures. They also struggle to improve, enhance their operational efficiency, bog down in these manual efforts and stuff like that. So once you start basically treating them with the data, then you sort of start increasing those operational efficiency. One of the best example I can give recently is that, ServiceNow tickets, like every one of in on IT, we must have gone to, or whether in business, whenever we raise some tickets for some issue, it goes through a manual process and approval process, get assigned to the right bucket and also things. It's a very long process. If you automate that, and if you drive that through data, some of the processes can be automated, and that's essentially what you're doing is just gaining an operational efficiency. I think Matt talked about that. The moment you start having the right data, you can use that for personalized marketing campaigns, and it can always lead to your personal productization or customer retention, gaining new customers and XYZ, and essentially leading to higher conversion rates, and also leading to increase in your not only acquiring new customers, but also reducing the churn and basically retaining the existing customers. That's really, really important. So that's essentially, in a nutshell, what data can do as a business. Why it matters now more than ever before. I think I know you guys were saying like, okay, it's a 20-year-old story and also things, and we all know how important the data is, but it is becoming more and more important these days as it was in the past, for various reasons. AI is one of them. The other bit is the moment you start treating data as an asset, I think you start seeing that some of the governance around the data and some of the issues which we have been observing data for ages, for example, data quality issues and data lineage, they started becoming more and more prominent. And as a result of that, essentially, you start to take a more and more notice of that essentially if your data is not correct, then you are having a lot of issues. Garbage in, garbage out, the kind of situations you start to deal with. And that's why I think it's very, very important that we start treating data as an asset now. Data is exploding in volumes, and the AI, we all know that how much data we need to train our ML models and LLMs and also things. So it's important that because of these expanding volumes of the data and AI demands, we start treating data as an asset so that we can build the necessary governance around it. We also need to build some trust with our regulators. Governance is a massive issue. I come from a very thick financial background. Even in BCG, I work with various BCMs, banking and capital market clients, where I saw the regulators were always very harsh on these organizations, and they were always struggling to build the trust with the investors and the customers. The ECG scorings and all these things they're working really, really hard, but the data was not giving them the right scores because it was not treated as an asset. And because it was not treated as an asset, it doesn't have the right quality, does not have the right governance around it. And that's why it's becoming a more and more important that businesses and functions now started to treat data as an asset. Every organizations now feel the competitive pressure and also they want to invest a lot of things in Gen AI as well. And all of these requires to bring the right data at the right time, at the right pace, at the right place, whether you call it a unified data platform or you want to call it a data joined together, or you want it a centralized data platform, whereas you will hear the various vocabularies around it. All of these things are basically building a lot of pressure on the organizations to essentially start considering data as an asset and essentially resolve all the issues around data. So yeah, I think it's very, very important. The time has come now that we basically start treating data as an asset. So how do we define data as a business asset, and how do we unlock data's competitive advantage? I think, as Matt was saying, it's not most of the time a technical issue. I think it's more of a business value, how you identify the business value and how you identify the necessary outcomes related to the initiatives which you are basically delivering through data and AI. One of the most important thing is, I think, Matt, you touched this briefly on the governance. The time has arrived now where essentially once you define the data asset as an asset, you start defining the governance around it. You start to engage in the data quality issues. You start to engage in the data lineage. You start to engage in the data literacy. The moment you say this data is my asset, for example, HR has got its data, and I said I will treat my data as a product, as an asset. I will build a data product around HR, and that will be my asset. All of a sudden, people will come and ask you, what is it all about, what it will give you, and all that automatically generates some sort of literacy around it. It automatically generates some sort of lineage around it, automatically generates a governance issues around it. And that's why this is where you start to unlock the competitive advantage around data. The cross-functional alignment increases all of a sudden, because you know that, okay, this asset belongs to risk, this asset belongs to legal, this asset belongs to HR, for example. The moment you start having those kind of ownership, the moment you start having those kind of definitions of the data products and asset around it, the cross-functional alignment increases because you know where to go and where to access the data from. And as I said, the ownership becomes quite clear. So many organizations have been to, especially at HSBC as well, when I had a different functions like private banking, wealth and private banking, commercial banking. We always struggle actually the ownership of the data. We always struggle, who makes this decision that this person can access this data, or this person can take the data from A to B, or this data can be transformed in a certain format so that it can be used for the advanced analytics or AI or insights and everything. And those people who were in the position of to make the decisions were actually not making decisions because there was not clear ownership. So the moment you start creating data as a business asset, you automatically start assigning a CDO or a data owner or data stewards, and essentially started defining a ownership of that for the data. And that leads to bringing the data together and essentially remove the silos. What happens at the moment is, like, if you don't have the governance, if you don't have the ownership, people will, this quite well grained into most of the industries, that data can be taken from anybody to anywhere, and it increases the data silos. By creating data as an asset strategy, you basically remove those data silos. Integration issues also are one of the most prominent things I've seen in my experience. When you have an applications, when you have systems, when you have interconnecting applications which basically are data hungry, if you don't have the real definitions of the data, if you don't have the real data products, if you don't have those assets stored at the right place, then you always have the integration issues. Sometimes you have no idea that which application or which source you should go to and integrate your application to. If I were to give you an example, at BCG, we had this issue where, depending on which system you log into, it will tell you your location different, right? Some places it depends. If I'm, let's say, logging into a system, it might say that I'm based out of Boston. Some places it will say, oh, I'm based out of London. It depends on the system. And because it was not created as an asset, because the data product was not created around HR, the data was in silos. And as a result of that, we saw that integration issues. Every application you log into were giving different answers. And as a result of that, you would see a lot of issues like that. And that's where I think when you start creating data and as an asset, you start essentially resolve these integration issues, and then all of a sudden this data become trusted. I think that's what Matt was saying as well. You know where it needs to go to, and essentially once you access that data, you know that you will get the right answer. And you know that this, if I access the data from this particular asset, it will give me a right location for the employee. It will give me the right date of birth of that employee. It will give me the right level, or the location, and essentially the role of that particular employee. So these kind of issues starts to gets resolved. And then I'm not going to go too deep into this, but essentially there are other areas where it can help you. I think one of the most important thing I should also say is what I've observed is where the industries actually struggle at the moment, and specifically when it comes to AI in the last 1.5 years when I've been working in AI and Gen AI, is that adoption of the AI and Gen AI is very, very low. And the reason being is because the business users or the C-suite members of the organizations are unable to define the business value around those AI initiatives. And the reason they struggle is because they don't know that for that particular AI initiative, what sort of data they should get to, where should get their data from, and essentially, will they be able to deliver the outcome or whatever the little they know about that AI initiative to the data they are accessing. And as a result of that, the ROI is essentially not well defined. The moment you start creating data as an asset, you know that you can build the AI and advanced analytics initiatives around it, and you know that the kind of business value you'll deliver, and essentially all of a sudden you can then dictate the ROIs, and they are measurable ROIs, and that basically leads to the funding for those AI initiatives quite straightforward and simple, if not very difficult. So yeah, that's essentially what it gives us. Gives how do we can unlock the data as competitive advantage. Last but not least, what is the impact across various C-suite? Based on my experience, I have observed that the moment you start talking about data, as Matt was also saying, you don't want to talk in terms of technical terms. If all of these C-suite members, they're not interested in how you will resolve these problems or issues around data through technology. The main thing is how do we essentially give the definite strategic business values or measurable business outcome from the data. So yeah, the moment from the CEO perspective, it basically gives them quite clear indication that it will unlock the innovation and essentially creates the long-term value. So for example, in my previous organization, we created this customer 360 data products. We had customer 360, risk 360, HR 360, and we not only used those to unlock the innovations, but also create lots of initiatives around it, but also create a long-term business value. And also we used that for monetization purpose as well. And that essentially is where it's being driven from the CEO level. For the chief financial officers and for the HR people, it ensures that it gives them the necessary place to tap into, which not only helps them to accurate the forecasting and essentially then help them to do the cost optimization of various vendors and various other bits and pieces, but also helps them to predict the attrition, enhances workforce planning, and all sorts of various other bits and pieces. And the last but not least, the CTO and CDOs, they can help with this. They can help to build the scalable foundation, build the centralized platform, and use that data to distribute and democratize across various organizations or across various functions, and essentially give them the right value around it. So yeah, there are some real world examples I've used over here. Some of them I've worked on them. Some of them I've just picked up from just where I knew a little bit. So for example, AI-powered fraud detection reduced losses by $10 million annually. I did not intentionally mention the customer or the client here because obviously there is some NDAs around it. But yeah, I will just let you guys read a bit of it. But the interesting thing is the Netflix one. The Netflix data-driven recommendation system accounts for 75% of the viewer activity, right? So you can imagine like how I think I'm always been a very, very influenced and impressed by Netflix. Even before any organization came into started using or leveraging the data, Netflix was always ahead of it. I mean, you guys have seen it. When you go on Netflix, you see the genre, you see the movies, and you can see the themes. You can pause and you can restart. If you have a family account, for example, 2 people watching Netflix at the same time, even if the same movie or the same program, can pause at different place and start again. That's all because that's how they've driven the decisions around data. That's how they use their real-time data pipelines to bring the data at one place and create that as an asset around it, and essentially build the necessary solutions around data, because they've cleaned that data, they have governed the data very well. So yeah, these are some of the examples which I took from the real world. Okay, that's me. I'm happy to take any questions.
I think we've got one. Hafiz has put a question in the chat. I don't know. Did you want to read it out, or did you want me to? I'm happy either way.
Yeah, I was not looking at the chat. If you, I can look at it, but there's a busy chat now. Jane,
No,
if you don't mind.
that's
Yeah.
fine. I was going to see if Hafiz wanted to ask a question, or I'll ask. Shall I ask? I'll ask it for you. So Hafiz has said how to strategically tackle the old legacy mindset of using data and transform business processes and management mindset to use it as an asset and trust on data as a single version of truth. So that's a question for both of you.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is, I think the data lineage plays a very quite important role in that. And the way you have seen is the business leaders are started to realize that when you have legacy systems, it basically restricts you to essentially build some of the applications or customize some of these applications and enhance some of those applications to a certain beyond certain level. And this is where you start to see an issues from the organization perspective and leadership perspective. That's number one. The second thing you always observe from the leadership perspective when you are working on a legacy system, that the access to the data is always not very well governed, because these legacy systems are built, the data transformed and built in such a way that you don't have the data lineage. You don't have information where and how this has been transformed into a product or an asset, whichever it is. And once you start lacking those kind of information, you start to create some sort of doubts around it, and essentially you sort of cannot control the access around it. You cannot control who is accessing what, whether it's sensitive or not sensitive, because you can't define it, because you don't know. And this starts building up in various ways. And this is where I think probably you start working with the leadership to start moving from the legacy system to the modern platform architecture and essentially single source of truth. When it comes to the single source of truth, you also have to buy the business leadership's stakeholders trust that by doing this, you will access the data in a right way and the right information. One of the examples I can give you is like date of birth, right? You can clearly show to the business, if you show to the business user that, listen, which system, in one system, the date of birth is a date, month, and year. In one system is a year, month, and date. And one system, the year is missing. And in some cases, the date of birth is a future date of birth. In some systems, the date of birth is like, for example, saying a person is 150-year-old. When you don't have a single source of truth, that means you are having all those kind of issues in combination. What are the two, I think? So what it helps you to knowledge and this and create the business process to bring the data into modern architecture and create a single source of truth and build the trust around the data. I think trust is the most important matter. I use trust many times today, right? And this is where essentially I think you sort of buy in and get the funding and get the necessary, a nod from the leadership to go ahead and build these kind of single source of truth and the products around, various data functions.
It is. It's hugely important. It's that trust and the communication. I think the two go hand in hand. Especially when you're basically selling data as an asset to the business. So really important. Thanks, Devendra.
Just to add to that, the great points by Devendra. I mean, this is typical transformation work. Whenever you do a transformation, you're moving from one train track to the next. And so this is just moving from one train track. You just do typical transformation steps. And it's all about people, the mindset of what's important to them, what are they trying to understand or deny, and you move them. Frankly, not everyone will move. In every transformation, you have people, as they say in organization speak, who won't get on the train. And there's people that don't understand why the train's leaving. So it's all about, as you said, you're completely right, trust. But it's about communication. And I always use the Kubler-Ross change curve to get people from sort of that anger denial to acceptance. And you can do that more and more effectively by finding change agents that will work with you. People that are really sort of friends of the people that are resistant, and if they understand what you're trying to do, they can have that conversation rather than you both hitting loggerheads. It's all about understanding what they need and then also working with change agents to get them to move towards the future direction of the company.
Yeah.
And I think the cost plays quite an important role as well. Most of you must have heard Teradata is quite ingrained in the financial organizations. Every organization has tried their level best. They are trying even harder now to move away from Teradata to the modern cloud platform architecture, because they're paying millions in licensing, and essentially at the same time still not able to achieve the right business outcomes from the Teradata. What I'm trying to say is the cost also plays some of the important role in that stuff. The moment by doing the right transformation program, as I was saying, then essentially the ROI becomes quite clear. You know that, okay, if I spend $2 million on it in 6 months' time, a year's time, and 2 years' time, if my $2 million will be basically saved in the licensing, but in the future, basically those license saving cost will be further down, and also I will be achieving more growth than other outcomes. It will turn into some sort of growth. So it helps you to define those ROIs, as well, when you comes into this kind of cost-related problem statement.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just aware of time, so we've got a couple of questions. Eric, I think you were first, and then we've got Philip.
10 or 20 years ago, there were statements on websites where we were capturing customer data about, we're only going to use your information to do this, that, and the other. And right now, we can produce core data sets that have everything we know about a given customer or thing in our system, and we can put some metadata over the top of it. I mean, I'm making this sound easy, but it's being done. We've now can point AI at it with triples and knowledge graphs, and AI can do things that we can't imagine, and does. Is the conversation going on with the clients that you have, I guess particularly you, Matthew, because you've mentioned some of the engagements that you're doing? Is anyone asking that question anymore? Do we need to inform anyone about what we're doing, and can we actually comply anymore with, we gathered your data for this purpose, so that's all we're doing with it? Because I don't think we can say that anymore. Is that a conversation still?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. You've got to go through your legal, you've got to go through your data governance. This is missteps cost millions.
I work for a law firm, so yeah. But I just wondered, because you don't hear much about it now.
I mean, for any data that you're using for a different use than what the customer signed off for is very, as you know, for a law firm, is very dangerous ground, especially if those customers find out. So you need to be very careful with any use or reuse or different uses of data. Like, we've got customers asking us now to monetize third parties' data into that marketplace. So you have to absolutely have to step through all the hoops and be careful.
Yeah, and I'll just add a couple of things on that, Eric. Answer is 100% yes. But one of the other things most of the people might know here is that when you log into any website or anything, it asks for your cookies, acceptance, and all sorts of things. So basically what is happening is even the clickstream data which we are collecting is basically some sort of acceptances around it. Once you have those data, once you have accepted those cookies, analytical cookies, I'm not sure whether you observed there are different kind of options of emerge now on the website. You can accept advanced analytical cookies or accept basic cookies or things like that. So essentially you are one or more or less, we are still asking about it, and essentially then build the stories around it. But the other thing I would also say is that what industry have started to do, and I will use one of the example for a healthcare client. Again, I can't name it for various reasons. Imagine how sensitive healthcare data is. Just imagine for a second, if by mistake that data lands into somebody's hands who doesn't know this person, but this person, all the health information related is being revealed, then it becomes a major issue. So it is even more strenuous in healthcare. But what actually the industries have started to do in a clever ways, started to tokenize and anonymize the data. So they can still do the analytics, they can still do the AI related stuff on top of that. It may not be related to real customer, but they started to anonymize. So there are ways around it, but they still do in a legal way, in a right way,
Yeah.
No, thanks for that. Thanks for that both. Philip, you put a question.
Yeah, just an observation really. In my experience, I found that the nature of the business really affects and influences the appetite and ability and genuine commitment of the exec level to commit to articulating data-based use cases and fulfilling them. So, for example, working in a very well-defined service within a public sector contract, there isn't really an imperative to grow. If you're performing within tolerance, there isn't really an imperative to drive efficiency. And so I guess I'm interested in Matthew and Devendra, where you've seen that, I guess, sort of data being stifled by a lack of genuine commitment to use cases and how you've overcome that.
Yeah, so I think, as I said, one of the most, there are two types of scenarios which happens, right? Number one, or not in any particular, one of them is people or the leadership is unable to define the business value around the data. And as a result of that, what happens is the moment you cannot prove, the moment you cannot define, or the moment you cannot show the ROI on a certain initiatives, then any of the C-suite member of the organization will not approve you, will not provide you the funding, right? They will say, why? So it's the what and why. Everybody can go, I want to do this, which is the what. But 90% of the time, why this fails is because you cannot define the why.
Yeah.
And essentially that's the problem. And this is where I think the AI adoption is so low. Only still last time when I heard, it was still only 31 to 33% of the organization in the whole world has started to do some of the Gen AI. And the reason being is because the trust and the business value around it. They cannot define it. They cannot define. And even if they do, they are not measurable. When then they say, okay, I will achieve this kind of business outcome. I will achieve 30% efficiency of this. Then the question is, how? How will you going to measure it? Or does this mean that you achieve 30% efficiency? That means you're going to get rid of 30% of the data engineers. And the answer is silence, right?
Yeah.
So that's one. I think it's very interesting the ways in public sector is that they still want to legacy infrastructure. Recently, MOD basically sent out a RFP where they want to move the data from cloud back to on-prem. Now, people might be shocked here because that's the kind of requirement MOD wants. That's the kind of environment they want to operate in. They don't need to show to the world that the growth, don't need to show to the world that, okay, they will grow 15% next year or 20% next year. What they need to do though is to show to the government that whatever they're doing is secure, whatever the necessary information they have around arms and other bits and pieces and also things is secure in a perimeter, which is guarded by the 5 gunmen and this blah, blah, XYZ, right? And essentially for them, they are happy with that. And they're not very keen in terms of putting lots of money in initiatives, in terms of initiatives, AI, Gen AI, and sort of things. So there are various examples like that, but I think it's a combination of these two, Philip, which is where I think, where we are stuck at this moment of time,
Thank you.
Do you want me to add, or just conscious of time?
Just conscious of time.
Yeah.
It's entirely up to you, Matthew. If you wanted to add to it, or happy to move on.
No, let's because I see a couple of hands
I know
up as
we
well.
are conscious of time. Hafiz, you've got a question. I think you're next, and then we've got Tina before we wrap up.
Yeah, I just wanted to know the importance of a proof of concept kind of activity over a legacy system, like Dave was mentioning about the MOD people moving back. I mean, what tool or techniques to be applied to convince the old mindsets to accept the transformation for the fruitfulness of their own business and their own scalability. That's one of the challenges that I'm facing right now, where I'm managing like 10,000 databases within one server environment, and I'm like convincing them the company wants to move towards AI and they want to centralize the data, and I'm finding very difficult to convince them, really, my friends, this is not the best ideal architecture for you to apply the Gen AI on that kind of data set. But it's taking me a lot of back and forth communication. So just being in this forum of experts, I just wanted to have a quick fix towards that methodology and approach. But I believe I have already got a lot of valuable insight from Matthew and Dave. And if you would like to add anything about the POC, yeah.
Just on that, I had the exact same question from this person who was very ahead. He was a head of people data, and they wanted him to move into AI, but he said his data's not ready. He was not ready to do that. They were not ready as an organization. And I said, flip the switch around. You've got people who want to invest money in your AI strategy and your AI delivery, and say, what will it take for you to get there? So rather than say, no, we can't do it, we have to wait, we have to do this, we have to do that, we say, we can absolutely do it, but we need these phases to get there before we can absolutely invest and get the best out of AI. So that's what I advised him to do, was stop saying no to people who wanted to invest money in and start saying yes, and let's go for it, and this is how we do it. So you then control the narrative. You bring the narrative back to yourself and back to the way you want to do it, and they listen to you as the expert. You are the expert in this. So that's how I advised, is think about, they want something, you can control it as the expert. How do you control it so you deliver what you want to deliver and get that funded to deliver what they want? They still go away happy, you go away happy, everyone wins.
And it goes back to what Devendra said as well in terms of the why, doesn't it? And showing.
Yeah, and one of the things I've learned, Jane, first out of my BCG, Hafiz, I was struggling in similar sort of thing. But what I did something interesting. I changed the word from POC to POV. Now, there's nothing different, to be honest. It's just the narrative, right? I said, oh, I don't know what proof of concept you're talking, but what I'll do for you, I'll do the proof of value, right? Yeah. And they said, what is it? And I said, listen, I'll do a proof of value for you in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, maximum 3 to 4 weeks, not longer than that. Take the basic fundamental thing, do the POV and say, hey, you see here, that's the value. And by the way, this is most rudimentary. If you then add on to this, and Matt said, then you build a roadmap on top of that, then you start to buying it. Then the stakeholder starts getting
scale. Yeah, absolutely.
And I said, okay, this is the value I've delivered for such a simple thing. But if I do this, then my value becomes this and that and that. And then you show the value for each stages and each phases and also things, and they start to start winning these stakeholders,
Yeah. No,
wonderful strategy, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Hafiz.
Tina, one very final question, because I know we do have to wrap up.
I'm not sure we got time for this, to be honest with you. I'll mention it, but I'm not sure we'll have time to debate it. But
it's a whole other webinar, right?
I was just really interested in the conversation of Philip's question and that perspective on public bodies in particular. Really interesting, because we know the government is trying to generate operational efficiency within government to reduce the cost of governing, and they're looking at AI. Everyone's looking at AI, right? They're looking at AI for that, and I'm sitting there listening to it thinking, I can see what you're saying. Basically, we're saying there's a bunch of people in charge who don't understand data, who don't understand how you can get value out of data, and therefore how you can get value out of AI. how on earth is the government going to achieve, and we all want them to achieve more efficiency within the government, considering the starting point we're in, and Philip's point around, you know, people's incentive to get this right, because unless they get it right, we won't see the value as you know, as the public. We won't see the
and
value.
it's the culture as well, Tina.
Yeah.
My wife works for HMRC and she's in a very senior role, but I see her doing stuff and I'm thinking she never talks about data and AI to achieve those operational efficiency, because the leadership around there is, I'm sure HMRC has got CDOs and stuff like that. I think they must. I would be very surprised or shocked if they don't. But I never hear from her, oh, basically, you know, oh, for this thing now we have decided to do this, which will basically automate the process. She's still stuck into BI, Power BI, and creating those things. And
unless someone starts to hold these guys accountable, and I don't know who that would be, do they have performance management like you do in a commercial organization, for example? I just thought it was a fascinating, you know, it made my brain go in that direction.
I think the one thing for me on that is pointing to other departments. There are departments like National Highways that are doing some really good work. You know, you've got to look for those nuggets of those people that are doing really good things that can influence. You know, and as Eric said, don't call Elon. Thanks, Eric. But just you know, just look for people that are doing similar things. What I did was form communities. You form communities that are doing similar things, and you find out some really good stuff, and then you can basically get those communities talking and the senior leaders talking together about the values of it.
Yeah,
it's not easy. It's not easy. It's a big hill.
I completely agree. I was just sitting here thinking, oh, I wonder how this is going to play out.
It's a big mountain to climb.
Yeah.
Let's see. Well, I know we've just gone over the hours, so I will wrap up. But just wanted to say thanks so much, obviously, to Devendra and Matthew for presenting today. I've certainly learned a lot. Lots and lots of key kind of takeaways. I think from this, I think it's clear to see that organisations who treat data, you know, as an asset are, you know, outperforming their competitors. We need to look at obviously the C-suite, you know, leaders taking accountability and owning and buying in, I suppose, to the data agenda. I think that's hugely important. So yeah, lots and lots. The importance of building a customer-centric, data-enabled culture, I think is really, really important as well. So, but just wanted to say thanks everyone for attending and those listening, and obviously our fantastic, I can say it now, Matthew, speakers.
Well, that's to be judged, but
yeah,
thanks for the questions, they were great.
Yeah, and thank you all for attending, and definitely join the Leaders Advisory Board group on LinkedIn. And if anyone's got any ideas as well, because we are still fairly new in setting up this group, you know, any kind of discussions that you think would really benefit around the C-suite and how we can really kind of push the data agenda and make sure everyone's aligned, I think is hugely important. So just, you know, zip any ideas over to me. But for now, have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. And yeah, hopefully see you on the next webinar.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thanks very much.
Thanks so
nice
much.
to see you all.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.